Hi, I'm Rob, and I'd like to welcome you to this video where we'll build an AI RAG chatbot with Amazon Bedrock, knowledge bases, and OpenSearch, then interact with the chatbot via a Lambda function through an API gateway. The data we'll be putting into the knowledge base is for a fictitious company named AI Agent Ensure. And for the company data, I have several markdown files with company profile information, product listing, and individual files for the individual products. Now I'll jump over to the AWS Console, and in S3 we see I have an AI Agent Ensure Assets bucket with the markdown files uploaded. Now let's jump over to Bedrock, and under Build we'll select Knowledge Bases. Then we'll create a knowledge base with a vector store. I'll give it a name. Let it create a new IAM service role. And for the data source type, we'll use S3. I'll click Next. I'll take the default data source name, browse to the S3 bucket, and then for parsing strategy, I'll keep the Amazon Bedrock default parser since we're only working with markdown files. Here I'll keep the default chunking policy, and under advanced settings, make sure that the data deletion policy is set to delete. Click Next. Then I'll select an embeddings model, and I'll use Titan Embeddings G1 Text v1.2 with on-demand inference and apply. Then for the vector store creation method, we'll use the quick create option and select a vector store type of Amazon OpenSearch Serverless. I don't need any additional configuration, so I'll click Next, Review, and then create the knowledge base. Okay, now that the knowledge base has been created, let's jump over to OpenSearch, and we'll go into Collections under the Serverless section. And we see our collection. And if we click OpenSearch Dashboard, I'll explore on my own. Then I'll select DevTools. And here we see we can execute a query against the data in the knowledge base. So let's go ahead and run. And right now we see we have no data. So let's jump back into the Bedrock console. And what we need to do under data source is select the knowledge base and then sync. And this will sync the knowledge base data source with the data in S3. And with the data source synced to the data in S3, we could jump back into the OpenSearch DevTools and run the search again. And now we see we have data in the vector store. So let's jump back into our Bedrock knowledge base, and then we'll click the Test Knowledge Base button and select a model for inference. And we'll go with Anthropic, Claude Sonnet 4. And we can ask a question. What is AI Agent Ensure? And we see our response with source references. And if we look at the details, we can see the source chunks. So let's close this and ask another question. What products does this company offer? And we see the list of products. And we'll ask one more question. Asking what type of coverage this product offers. And again, we see the results. Now, with our knowledge base set up, let's jump over to Lambda, create a new function. I'll author from scratch, give it a name, and a runtime of Python 3.12. I'll leave the default execution role, then create. Now I'll jump into the function configuration and change the timeout to 3 minutes. Then open the execution role and add permissions for Bedrock full access. Now I'll add environment variables for knowledge base ID, which we can get from the knowledge base in Bedrock, and for the foundation model ID, which we can get from the model catalog in Bedrock. I'll filter on Anthropic and select Claude 3.5 Sonnet and grab the ID. Now I'll update the Lambda function code by jumping into cursor, copying, then pasting, then deploy. Now, before we test, let's take a quick walk through the code to see what it does. So here we have 3 imports for JSON, OS, and Boto3. Then we're creating variables for the knowledge base ID and foundation model ARN, which get their values from the environment variables we set in the Lambda environment. Now we're creating a service name variable, setting it equal to Bedrock agent runtime, and then passing that into the Boto3 client to get an instance of the service. This is a utility function that takes a Lambda event as a parameter, then extracts the query string from the event and returns it. Then in the Lambda handler, we create a query variable which calls the utility function, passing it the event. Then we call retrieve and generate on the client, passing the user's query as the input text, then setting the retrieve and generate configuration for the knowledge base, passing the knowledge base ID and the foundation model ARN. When the response comes back, we'll print it and then get the citations from it, as well as the S3 locations and the response text. Then we'll build a response dictionary, setting the status code, the query, the generated response equal to the response text, and the S3 locations. And finally, return the response. Now, back in the Lambda console, I'll select Test, create a new test, give it a name, then edit the JSON to pass a query property with a value of what is AI agent ensure. Now save and test. And we see our results. So let's now jump into API Gateway, create a new REST API, give it a name, and create it. Now I'll add a resource with a resource name of chat, then add a method, which will be a post, then the Lambda function we just created, and create the method. Now let's test it. And we see our result. So let's deploy the API, give it a stage and a name, then grab the invoke URL, open a terminal, and hit it with our query, and we see the results. Now, before we leave the AWS console, we're going to do some cleanup. We'll start with the API gateway, then the Lambda function, now we'll go back to the Bedrock Knowledge Base and select it, and then delete. Okay, with the knowledge base deleted, Now we need to jump back over to OpenSearch, go back into Serverless Collections, select our collection, and delete this. And this is definitely the one that you do not want to forget to delete because this is going to cost you money. Now we'll just refresh and we see the collection is gone. And then of course you could go empty and delete your bucket. So that concludes this video on building an AI RAG chatbot with Amazon Bedrock, knowledge bases, and OpenSearch, and accessing it via a Lambda function through API Gateway. If you found it interesting, feel free to give it a like. And if you'd like to be notified when I add more content to the channel, please consider subscribing. In the next video, we'll build a fast API backend and a Streamlit frontend to interact with the chatbot. Thanks for watching.